Hi, I'm Dr. Leo Montejo. I'm going to talk to you today about remote monitoring and what WISES can do with it. So what is remote monitoring? Remote monitoring is when a patient, for instance, in a far distant place, places a monitor like this on his finger, and the data then through either 3G, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, or satellite comes to a web server on the internet, and then the data can be viewed, as we can see here, on a web browser anywhere in the planet. Now, what are the traditional problems that remote monitoring has had in the past? Well, for one thing, in the past we had poor communications to be able to get the data from here to the server. If, for instance, we are in a remote area in the southwestern United States at a, for instance, Indian reservation, they may not have appropriate coverage, and we need to be able to use 4G or satellite to get the data to the server. Then in the past, all of these devices, this is a perfect example of one, have all been Bluetooth, and so we need a telephone to act as a bridge to pick up the data from this device, send it over to our server, and in this case, this is a pulse oximeter. We see the data here live, and each one of these curves that you see here has about 125 points, and if we have somebody wearing a pulse oximeter like this all day, the problem is that we collect a lot of garbage. If I have a lot of movement, if it falls off a little bit or whatever, the data that we're going to see here is not hospital quality, like when we have a patient lying still in an operating room or an intensive care bed or in his bed in the hospital. It's going to be a lot of data that we have to throw away because it's not useful. And so we end up collecting a lot of trash data. And as an example, the newer watches like the Apple watches or the Garmin watches, which collect heart rate, indeed do collect a lot of data which is not useful. So what are we doing? Well, if we have somebody who is perfectly still and in a bed at home or wherever, then a system such as what I'm showing you here with Bluetooth is perfectly acceptable, and we can pick up data like EKG live, pulse oximetry live. We can pick up temperature. We can pick up, as you see here on the bottom right, with an accelerometer of movement. We can even see geolocation as to where they are. We can see what speed they're moving, etc. So all that works fine if we have instruments that are transmitting data that is perfectly reliable and that then we can view on a server like this. But the world is really not like this. In fact, what happens, as I said earlier, is that people move and the waves that we're seeing here that look so great with the EKG are going to start getting really squiggly. The heart rate is going to come in wrong. The pulse oxygen saturation is going to come in wrong. And so we have data that is useless to make medical decisions. So what are we doing at WISES to address this? I think the biggest advance that we have now, besides being able to show doctors screens that look identical to what they have at the hospital, is that in fact we can have devices now that instead of having Bluetooth, they have 4G incorporated into them. Now, what does this mean? That means that at any time that the patient places the device on his finger, the device begins transmitting data to the web server, and the moment that he takes it off, the data stops, and the data that we have collected is saved. Now, what does that do? Number one, that makes it so that when we collect data, the data is very accurate because we have instructed the patients that they be still while they do this. And second, that it becomes very simple for less common things that we want to monitor. And as an example, I'm going to lean down here for a second. I have here a scale. Or think of this also as a blood pressure monitor, where we take single readings once or twice a day. But with this device here that I have in my hands, the patient weighs himself. The 4G immediately goes on when he stands on the scale, sends in the piece of data, and disconnects right away. The same thing for a blood pressure. so that we can pick up very stable, very reliable pieces of information from anybody, not requiring them to have a bridge, which is a phone for Bluetooth, not require them to start an app before the device begins to connect to the phone, and then send it over from the phone to the web server. And therefore, I think that we finally have an ideal solution, really one that is not only useful for the patient because it's easy, it's useful for the doctors because we're not seeing a lot of garbage data, and it's makes a lot of sense from the healthcare viewpoint because we're not collating, we're not picking up, and saving thousands and thousands of data points which become completely useless and that we have to throw away. And that's WISE's Health 3.0, and thank you for watching.